Celestine Bell was 34 years old when a 26-year-old stranger walked up to her at brunch, leaned in close, and laughed in her face. "I took your man," Destiny said, loud enough for the table to hear. "He says you don't even satisfy him anymore." Celestine didn't flinch, didn't argue, because 3 days earlier she'd found a voicemail Blake forgot to delete. Destiny's voice, gloating that Celestine was just the paycheck now. What Destiny didn't know was that Celestine wasn't just Blake's wife. She was the CFO who'd built the company he was about to present someone else's work at. She'd already traced the diverted funds, already found the second account hiding under Destiny's almost name, already made one phone call to a forensic accountant who happened to be family. Destiny smiled like she'd already won. Celestine smiled back and said nothing. What happened next would cost them both everything they thought they'd taken from her. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The alarm hadn't gone off yet when Celestine opened her eyes. 5:47 a.m. The room was still dark. The ceiling fan turned slow and quiet above her. Blake was on his side of the bed, facing away, his breathing heavy and even. She lay still for a moment, listening to the house. Then she got up. By 6:30, she was at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a mug of black coffee going cold beside her. 2 spreadsheets, side by side, one for the household, one for the company. She did this every morning, had done it for years. The household account showed the mortgage payment had cleared, $3,840, same as always. Her payment. Her name, technically, on the original loan, because when they'd bought the house 6 years ago, Blake's credit score had been sitting at 591, and she hadn't said a word about it to anyone, not even her Aunt Yolanda. She'd just signed the papers and moved them in. She scrolled down. Car insurance for both vehicles, utilities, the quarterly payment to her mother's physical therapist in Houston. All covered, all on time, all managed by the same pair of hands that were wrapped around this mug right now. On the business side, things were steady. She'd spent most of Thursday restructuring the quarterly projections for the logistics company. A deal she'd been quietly building for 7 months was finally close to landing. The board meeting was in 2 weeks. She'd be ready. She closed the business tab. Today wasn't a work day. Not entirely. Today was their anniversary. 10 years. She'd made the reservation at Marigold weeks ago. A window table. The good wine. She'd even pulled out the dark green dress Blake used to say was his favorite, though she couldn't remember the last time he'd said something like that. He came downstairs at 8:15, phone already in hand. "Morning," she said. He poured coffee without looking at her. He was wearing the gray joggers he lived in on weekends, and his jaw was unshaven in that deliberate, styled way he'd started doing lately. He looked good. He knew it. "I confirmed the reservation," Celestine said. 7 o'clock. Marigold. He looked up. "Tonight?" "Our anniversary, Blake." Something moved across his face. Not guilt, exactly. More like mild inconvenience. "Right. No, I know. I've just got some things to wrap up." He looked back down at his phone. "It's fine." She watched him scroll. Tap. Scroll again. "You look tired," he said, not looking up. "I woke up early." "You always wake up early." He took a sip of coffee. "You should do something with your hair tonight. You used to try harder." He said it the way someone says it looks like rain, casual, like it was just an observation about weather. Celestine looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her mug and took a slow sip. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. Dinner was beautiful, the way a photograph can be beautiful. All the right details in all the right places, but something flat behind the glass. The restaurant was warm and golden. The wine was exactly as good as she'd hoped. She'd worn the green dress. She'd done her hair. Blake ordered the salmon. He laughed at the right moments. He held her hand across the table for about 4 minutes before his phone buzzed and he turned it face down without showing her the screen. She noticed. She didn't say anything. He excused himself between the main course and dessert. Just a call, 2 minutes. She watched him through the window as he stood outside on the sidewalk, one hand pressed to his ear, his back half turned to the glass. He was nodding. His free hand moved when he talked. Whatever it wasn't business. She knew what his business calls looked like. His shoulders were different. He came back in smiling. "Sorry about that. Where were we?" "You were telling me about the Harmon account," she said. He hadn't been, but he picked it right back up, easy as breathing, and she let him talk, and she smiled, and she ate her dessert. She noticed the charge at 10:53 that night. Blake was already in bed. She was sitting against the headboard with the shared credit card statement pulled up on her phone, something she checked weekly, automatic as locking the front door. Her finger stopped scrolling. Hotel Ardent, $214. She went back to the previous month's statement. Hotel Ardent, $214. And the month before, Hotel Ardent, $198.50. She knew Hotel Ardent. It was a mid-range place on Decatur Street, about 20 minutes from Blake's office. She'd driven past it before, but had never had a reason to think about it. She had a reason now. Same hotel, same week of the month, 3 months in a row. She set her phone face down on her lap. She looked at the ceiling fan turning slow in the dark. She listened to Blake breathe. She didn't wake him up. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, very still, and let the number sit behind her eyes like a lit match. She didn't sleep much. She lay in the dark and listened to Blake breathe and stared at the ceiling and did the math over and over in her head. 3 months, same hotel, same week, $214. $214, $198.50. By 5:30, she gave up on sleep entirely and slipped out of bed. The kitchen was quiet. Gray morning light came through the window above the sink. She didn't make coffee yet. She just sat down at the table, opened her laptop, and pulled up the family cloud account. She managed this too, same as everything else. The phone plan, the cloud backup, the shared passwords in the little encrypted folder she'd set up 3 years ago because Blake kept forgetting his login to everything. He called it her control thing. She called it organization. He'd never once logged in himself. She navigated to the backup files. Texts first. She scrolled without urgency, her face calm, her breathing steady. There were a few things. Some late-night messages she didn't recognize the number for, brief, deleted from his phone but still sitting here in the backup like dust under a rug. She noted the number, kept moving. Then she found the voicemails folder. She plugged in her earbuds, clicked the first deleted file. Static. A pocket dial from his coworker Marcus. Nothing. Second file. She pressed play. The voice was young, bright in a sharp way, like something that could cut if you weren't careful. And it was laughing before it even said a word. "Hey, it's me. Just thinking about you. Also," a pause, a little laugh, loose and pleased with itself. "I ran into someone at Trish's thing last week who knows your wife. And I just have to say, baby, I am not worried. Not even a little bit. I've already won. She doesn't even know what game we're playing." Celestine's hand was flat on the table. She didn't move it. "You know what she is? She's background noise. That's all. Background noise. You told me yourself. She's just the paycheck now. That's it. That's all she is to you." Another laugh. Easy, delighted with herself. "Anyway, call me back. Miss you." The recording ended. Celestine sat very still. Outside, a car drove past. A dog barked twice somewhere down the street and then stopped. The refrigerator hummed. Just the paycheck now. She heard Blake's voice in it, even though it wasn't his voice. She heard the 8 years she'd spent managing every account, every bill, every quiet sacrifice reflected back to her in someone else's mouth, reduced to 5 words said with a laugh. She breathed in through her nose. Slow, even. Then she downloaded the file, saved it to a private folder she created in 30 seconds and password protected in 10, and uploaded a second copy to her personal cloud account, the one Blake had no access to and didn't know existed. Done. She sat back and looked at the window. The sky was getting lighter, a pale, thin blue coming up at the edges of the clouds. She watched it for a moment. Then she got up, measured out the coffee grounds, filled the pot with water, and started breakfast. Blake came downstairs at 8:40, showered, his hair still damp. He looked well-rested, relaxed. He sat down at the kitchen island and she set a plate in front of him. Eggs, toast, sliced fruit. And he picked up his fork and started eating without looking at her. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." He glanced at his phone, smiled at something on the screen, put it face down. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter across from him. She looked at his face, the easy way he held his jaw, the way he chewed and scrolled and existed in her kitchen like a man without a single thing on his conscience. Background noise. She took a sip of coffee. "I'm going into the office for a few hours tomorrow," she said. "On a Sunday?" "Board meetings in 2 weeks. A lot to finish." He shrugged. "Fine by me." Of course it was. The text came in just after noon while she was reorganizing files on her laptop. It was from Trish, bubbly, full of exclamation points, the way Trish always wrote. "Girl, don't forget! Brunch Sunday, noon at Calla's. You better be there!" Celestine smiled at her phone, a real one, small and tired. She and Trish had been friends since college. The brunch had been on the calendar for 3 weeks, a loose, easy thing, 6 or 7 women, good food, a picture of something cold. She'd almost canceled twice, but Trish had refused to hear it. She typed back, "I'll be there." Then she set her phone down and went back to her files. She had no reason to think about who else might be going. She had no way to know. She just knew Sunday was coming, and she had work to do before then. She clicked open the next document and got back to it. Calla's was the kind of place that smelled like vanilla and fresh flowers the moment you walked through the door. Round tables with linen cloths, little vases with sprigs of lavender. The kind of restaurant where the mimosas came in tall flutes and the portions were small and pretty on the plate. Celestine arrived at 12:08, which was early enough to be polite. She wore a deep burgundy wrap dress and her good earrings, gold hoops, simple, and she'd done her hair that morning with care. Not for anyone else, for herself. Trish was already at the table, waving before Celestine even spotted her. "There she is!" Trish stood up and hugged her hard. She smelled like vanilla, too. "I was worried you'd cancel again." "I said I'd come," Celestine said. She smiled, and this one was real. There were 4 other women already seated. She knew 3 of them, Mona, Patricia from the old neighborhood, a woman named Kezia who worked in marketing somewhere downtown. The 4th was a face she didn't recognize. Young, 20s, pretty in a loud way, with long nails painted white and a blouse cut low and a big, confident smile. Celestine sat down, unfolded her napkin, and reached for the water. The first hour was easy. Warm bread came out, then eggs, salmon, a fruit plate with mint scattered over it. Trish talked too much and too fast, the way she always did, and it was comfortable, familiar. Celestine ate and laughed at the right moments and let herself rest inside the noise of it. She had almost stopped watching the room. Almost. She noticed the young woman, the one she didn't know, looking at her. Not the way people look when they're trying to remember where they've met you. A different kind of looking. Deliberate. Like someone checking something against a picture in their head. Celestine reached for her mimosa and said nothing. A minute later, the young woman leaned across to Kezia and said something quiet. Kezia laughed, distracted, not really listening. The young woman sat back. Then she stood up. She picked up her glass and walked around the table with the kind of ease that came from being used to people watching her move. She stopped just behind the empty chair to Celestine's left and put one hand on the back of it. "You're Celestine," she said, not a question. Celestine looked up at her, calm, level. "I am," she said. The young woman smiled, wide, bright. She had the same quality in her face that she'd had in that voicemail, that loose, pleased with herself energy, like a woman who had already rehearsed this and liked how it was going to go. "I'm Destiny," she said. "I've seen your picture. Blake keeps one in his desk." She tilted her head, like she was offering something generous. "He talks about you a lot." "I'm sure he does," Celestine said. The table had gone a little quieter. Not silent, Trish was still talking to Patricia, but the two women closest had stopped their conversation. They were listening without looking. Destiny leaned down slightly, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel intimate, though not so low that no one could hear. "I just want you to know," she said, "that I'm not trying to be mean about this. It's just, he's mine now. Has been for a while." A small laugh, the same laugh from the voicemail, the easy, delighted one. "He says you don't even satisfy him anymore. Like, his words." She lifted one shoulder. "I thought you should know. Woman to woman." Woman to woman. The words sat in the air. Celestine looked at her, really looked at her. The white nails, the careful blouse, the confidence she was wearing like a new coat. A woman who had walked in here expecting tears, or anger, or the satisfaction of watching someone come apart at a brunch table. She set her mimosa glass down gently, and she smiled. It was a quiet smile, still, the kind that didn't reach for anything, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than the moment, from a woman who already knew things this girl hadn't figured out yet. "Good luck with him," Celestine said. That was all. She picked up her fork and turned back to her plate. Destiny stood there for one beat too long. 2. The smile on her face shifted, just barely, just at the edges, into something less certain. Then she walked back to her seat. The table breathed again. Trish launched into a story about her sister's new apartment. Patricia laughed. The mimosa pitcher made its way around. Everything resumed. Celestine finished her meal. She stayed another 40 minutes, laughed twice more, and hugged Trish at the door on her way out. She sat in her car in the parking lot and did not move for a moment. The sun was pressing through the windshield, warm on her hands. She held them in her lap and looked straight ahead at nothing. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. It rang twice. "Celestine?" Gideon's voice. Steady, even-keeled, the way he always was. "I need your help," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Every account, every transaction, every shared asset, mine, his, the business, all of it. I need the full picture." A short pause. "When do you need it?" "Tonight," she said. Gideon arrived at 7 with a laptop bag over one shoulder and a yellow legal pad tucked under his arm. He didn't hug her at the door. He looked at her face, gave one small nod, and came inside. That was enough. Celestine had already cleared the dining room table, account statements printed and stacked, bank records sorted by month, a yellow highlighter, 2 pens, her own laptop open to the cloud backup she managed for all of their shared accounts, the one Blake had never once thought to log into himself. Gideon sat down, set up his laptop, and cracked his knuckles. "Walk me through what you already know," he said. So she did. She told him about the hotel charges. She played him the voicemail. Once, all the way through, no comment. She laid the credit card statements in front of him in chronological order. He listened. He read. He didn't say anything about what a terrible husband Blake was or how sorry he felt. He just pulled the legal pad toward him and started writing. That was exactly what she needed. They worked for 2 hours without stopping. The dining room was quiet except for the sound of keys clicking and papers turning. A pot of coffee sat on the counter behind them. Celestine had poured 1 cup and let it go cold. The picture built itself slowly, the way pictures like this always did. One number pointing to another, one account feeding something that shouldn't exist. The first thing Gideon found was a transfer. Small, routine-looking. $200 moved from their joint checking account into what looked like a savings buffer, an account Celestine had seen listed before and assumed was theirs. It wasn't. "This account," Gideon said, turning his laptop so she could see the screen. "Whose name is on it?" Celestine leaned in. She read the account label. A number, a routing code, a name that was not hers. It was Blake's. Alone. She sat back. He never told me he opened that. He opened it 14 months ago, Gideon said. He was already clicking further. Give me a minute. He traced it forward. The 200 became 300, then 4, then 2 transfers in 1 month, then a larger one, $800, timed to the same week she had found the first hotel charge on the shared card. Celestine pulled her legal pad close and wrote down the dates, the amounts, the account number. What was the money used for? She asked. Gideon pulled up a linked records trail. He had access. She had given him the login credentials she managed, the ones Blake had never changed because he never thought to. He scrolled slowly, reading line by line. Then the stopped. Here, he said. She read it over his shoulder. A payment to a luxury goods retailer, $1,400. Then a second, a recurring monthly charge from a car leasing company, $462 a month, starting 11 months ago. Then 2 payments to an apartment complex, not their apartment complex, not any address she recognized. Celestine set the pen down. She picked it up again. She wrote it all down, every line, every date, every dollar amount, in her clean, even handwriting, the same way she would log a discrepancy in the company's quarterly report. Her hand did not shake, but she remembered, very clearly, the conversation she and Blake had had 9 months ago. February. She had been sitting in this same chair. He had slid a piece of paper across this same table and said they needed to talk about the budget. Said things were tight. Said her mother's medical supplement, $300 a month for a woman with bad knees and a fixed income, was something they needed to revisit. Just for now, he had said. Just until things loosen up. She had agreed. She had called her mother and lowered the contribution herself and told her it was temporary. $300 less for her mother, $462 a month for a car she had never seen, registered to a name she now knew. Celestine placed her pen flat on the legal pad. How much total? She asked. Her voice was level. Gideon added it up on the screen. He turned the laptop toward her without saying anything. She looked at the number. She nodded once. Then she wrote it down. By 9 o'clock, they had documented 11 months of transfers. Gideon had organized everything into a folder, digital copies, labeled by date, with a summary sheet at the front. He was thorough like that. It was why she had called him. He was closing a tab on his screen when he paused. There's one more thing, he said. He turned the laptop again. A single transfer, 6 weeks ago, larger than the others. This one went somewhere I haven't been able to trace yet. Different routing number. It didn't go to the car account or the apartment. He looked at it for a moment. I need to dig further on this one. How long? Day or 2, he said. Maybe less. Celestine looked at the number on the screen. Then she closed her own laptop and sat with that for a moment. Okay, she said. I'll give you time. She began stacking the printed statements into a neat pile, edges aligned. I have somewhere to be tomorrow anyway, she said. Priscilla Bell lived in a cream-colored house on a quiet street in Decatur, with flower boxes under every window and a welcome mat that said, "Family is everything," in looping cursive letters. Celestine had always found that mat funny, in a private way. She rang the bell at 11 on a Tuesday morning, holding a tin of butter cookies she had stopped for on the way, the kind Priscilla liked, the kind that came in the blue tin with the Danish writing on the lid. The door swung open. Celestine! Priscilla pulled her in with both arms. She smelled like powder and something warm baking in the oven. Come in, come in. I just put on a peach cobbler. You didn't have to do that, Celestine said. I always have something on when company comes. Priscilla waved her through the hallway. You know that by now. The living room was exactly as it always was. A cream sofa with too many throw pillows. Family photos lined across the mantel in matching gold frames. Blake's college graduation photo, front and center, a little larger than the others. Celestine sat down and smiled. Priscilla brought out sweet tea and set the cookies between them on the coffee table, still in the tin. "You look tired," Priscilla said, studying her. "You been working too hard again?" "Just busy," Celestine said. "Quarter close always gets like this." Priscilla settled back into her chair. "You need to let Blake take on more. He keeps saying you won't delegate." Celestine tilted her head just slightly. "He says that?" "All the time," Priscilla waved her hand. "Says you carry everything yourself, that you're stubborn about it." She smiled the way mothers smile when they think they're being helpful. "You know how he is. He just wants to be more involved." Celestine picked up her glass. "More involved how?" "Oh, with the business side. The board people, the investors." Priscilla reached for a cookie. "He told me he's been going to some of those dinners, building his relationships. Said it's good for the company to have him out there representing." "He's been attending board dinners?" Celestine asked. Her voice stayed easy, curious, the voice she used in meetings when she already knew the answer. "Some of them, yes," Priscilla bit into the cookie. "He mentioned one a few weeks back. Said the board thinks very highly of him, that they appreciate having someone like him in front of clients." She paused. "I think it's good, you know. He needs something that's his. He's always been a little, I don't know, in the shadow." Celestine nodded slowly. "Of course." She set down her glass and crossed her hands in her lap. "Did he mention anything about changes?" she asked. "On the business side?" Priscilla looked up. "Changes?" "Just restructuring, planning." Celestine gave a small shrug. "Things shift around at the end of the year sometimes. I just wondered if you'd said anything." "Well," Priscilla's expression softened into something that tried to look careful but wasn't. "He did mention, and I don't know the details, so don't hold me to it. He said something about you pulling back soon, from the day-to-day, that you'd been talking about it." Celestine looked at her. "He said I'd been talking about stepping back?" "Mm-hmm." Priscilla nodded, fully believing it. "Said it would be good for you, less stress, that maybe Blake could handle more of the heavy lifting going forward." She tilted her head the way she always did when she thought she was delivering good news. "He seemed excited about it, honestly. I think he's finally found his footing." Celestine smiled. It was the same smile she had given Destiny in the parking lot of that brunch. Steady, unreadable, a closed door with the lights off behind it. "That's good to hear," she said. She stayed another 40 minutes. She ate cobbler. She asked after Priscilla's sister. She listened to a story about a neighbor's new dog. When she stood to leave, she hugged Priscilla at the door and told her the cobbler was the best it had ever been, which was true. Priscilla beamed. "You come back soon, and tell Blake I said call his mother." "I will," Celestine said. She picked up her purse and walked to her car. She sat in the driveway for a moment, the engine off, her hands in her lap. Blake had told his mother Celestine was stepping back. He had been attending board dinners. He had been building relationships, her relationships, with her board, using access she had never revoked because she had never imagined she needed to. He hadn't just started an affair. He had been building an exit strategy for months. Patient, deliberate, and quiet, the one quality she had never expected from him. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Gideon picked up on the second ring. "He's been moving on the board," she said. No greeting, no preamble. Positioning himself, telling people I'm stepping back. She pulled her seatbelt across her chest. "I need you to pull his work calendar. Anything that involves the company, dinners, meetings, client events, everything in the last 6 months." "Understood," Gideon said. "And, Gideon," she started the engine, "did you find where that last transfer went?" The email was right there, sitting in the company's travel booking system like it had always belonged. Celestine had legitimate access to the platform. She was CFO. She approved travel budgets. She signed off on conference registrations. The system logged everything: names, dates, sessions, hotel rooms. And she had full admin rights because she had set up the account herself 3 years ago. She had almost forgotten that. Blake hadn't. She pulled up the registration records for the Meridian Logistics Investors Conference. It was a big one. Annual event, held at a hotel in Atlanta, 2 days of panel sessions and 1 formal dinner where companies made pitches to regional investors. Celestine had attended twice before. She had structured the deal they would be presenting this year, a new regional freight partnership that had taken her 4 months to build from scratch. She scrolled down the attendee list. Blake Bell, presenter. Session 3, Regional Growth Partnerships. She read it twice. She had not submitted that registration. She had not approved it. She had not listed Blake as a presenter on anything, because Blake had nothing to do with the freight partnership deal beyond sitting across the dinner table while she worked on it. She kept scrolling. Destiny Pruitt, guest registration. +1, Blake Bell. Celestine set the laptop down on the table. She stood up and walked to the kitchen. She poured a glass of water. She drank half of it standing at the sink, looking at the backsplash tile. Pale gray, small hexagons. She had picked it out herself when they renovated. Then she picked up her phone and called Gideon. "Pull up the conference system," she said when he answered. She heard keyboard clicks, then a long pause. "Yeah," Gideon said. Quiet, even for him. "Session 3, she said. "I see it." She walked back to the table and sat down. He registered himself as a presenter on the freight partnership. She kept her voice flat. "He didn't build that deal, Gideon. I structured every piece of it. The vendor contacts, the rate modeling, the partnership terms. He sat in on 2 calls. "I know," Gideon said. "I've seen the file history." "He's going to walk into that room, in front of our board, and present my work as his." She paused. "With her next to him." Another silence. Then Gideon said, "The conference is in 18 days. "I know." She pulled the laptop back toward her and stared at Destiny's name on the screen. Guest registration, +1, Blake Bell. The registration had been submitted 11 days ago, while Celestine was working late on Q4 projections. "Did you find the account?" she asked. "That's why I was calling you," Gideon said. "I found it last night." He walked her through it without rushing. The transfer from Chapter 4, the one he hadn't been able to trace, had landed in a personal checking account at a regional bank. The account was registered under the name Desiree N. Pruitt. Not Destiny, not a completely different name, just different enough to create friction. 1 letter off in the first name, middle initial inserted where there hadn't been one before. A small change, deliberate, the kind of change that made automated cross-referencing harder. "She opened it 4 months ago," Gideon said. 1 month after the transfers started. She didn't just receive the money, Celestine. She opened that account after the transfers began. She knew what was coming. Celestine sat with that for a moment. She had already known about the affair. She had already known about the financial theft. She had known Blake had been maneuvering with the board. But this was different. This was Destiny sitting down, opening a new account under a slightly different name, and holding out her hands for money she knew came from Celestine's joint accounts. Not a woman who got swept up in something. A woman who made a series of deliberate choices and covered her tracks while she did it. "Is the documentation clean?" Celestine asked. "Airtight," Gideon said. "Account opening date, transfer records, name discrepancy, all of it. I can have a complete report packaged in 2 days." "Do that," Celestine said. "Send me everything." She closed the travel booking platform. She opened a new document and began a list. Not frantic, organized. The same way she opened every new project, with a clean page and a clear sequence of steps. She wrote the conference date at the top. She stared at it. Blake believed she didn't know. Destiny believed she had already won. Both of them were walking toward that conference room with full confidence, because no one had given them a single reason to think otherwise. Celestine intended to keep it that way. She picked up her phone again. Not Gideon this time. She scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 2 weeks, a name that came with real weight behind it. Founding shares, institutional authority. A woman who had built this company before Celestine was old enough to read a balance sheet, and who had zero patience for people who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. She pressed call. It rang once. Celestine? Aunt Yolanda's voice was warm and dry at the same time, like good leather. Auntie, Celestine said, I need to meet with you, in person. There's something you need to see. The lawyer's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. Clean lines, gray carpet, a view of the city that made everything below look small and manageable. Celestine liked that. She sat across from her attorney, a woman named Sandra Kwame, who had handled her business contracts for 4 years. Sandra had a sharp, still face and the habit of listening without interrupting, which was exactly what Celestine needed right now. Celestine placed a folder on the desk between them. Joint accounts, marital assets, and these. She tapped the folder. Documented transfers from our shared accounts into a third-party personal account, opened under an altered name. 4 months of activity. The total is significant. Sandra opened the folder. Her eyes moved down the first page without expression. This is clean documentation, Sandra said. My cousin is a forensic accountant, Celestine said. He packaged it. Sandra turned a page, then another. You want a protective order on the remaining joint assets. Immediately, before the end of the week. Done. Sandra set the folder flat on the desk. And the business interest? Separate matter. My aunt is handling the shareholder side. Celestine folded her hands in her lap. I need the personal financial protection in place first. That's the priority today. Sandra nodded and reached for her pen. That meeting took 52 minutes. When Celestine walked back to her car, the folder stayed with Sandra. A copy stayed with Celestine. The joint accounts were flagged. No large withdrawals, no new transfers. Nothing moved without her sign-off. Blake would not notice. He never checked. That was the thing about someone who spent 8 years letting another person manage everything. They stopped paying attention. She met Aunt Yolanda 2 days later. Not at a restaurant, not somewhere soft. Yolanda had suggested her own home office, a room lined with filing cabinets and framed photos of job sites and shipping yards from the company's early years, back when it was 3 people and a leased truck. Yolanda sat behind her desk with her reading glasses on, working through Gideon's report page by page. She didn't speak while she read. She just turned the pages steadily, and the room was quiet except for that sound. When she finished, she took her glasses off and set them on top of the report. He registered himself as a presenter on your deal, she said. Yes. While telling board members you were stepping back. Yes. Yolanda was quiet for a moment. Her jaw shifted slightly, the way it did when she was containing something. And this girl, she pressed 2 fingers against Destiny's account records. She opened this account 1 month after he started sending money. Gideon confirmed the dates. So she didn't stumble into this. Yolanda's voice was flat. She planned. Yes. Yolanda stood up. She wasn't a tall woman, but she moved like she owned the floor under her feet. She walked to the window and looked out at her backyard for a moment. The fig tree she'd planted 20 years ago, wide and heavy now with summer leaves. I have enough shares to call an emergency session, she said. I've had enough since the beginning. She turned around. I want it timed to the 2nd day of the conference, after he presents. Celestine nodded. That's what I was thinking. Let him have his moment. Yolanda's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile exactly. It was something older than a smile. Let him stand up in front of those investors and say everything he's going to say. Then we correct the record. Gideon's report will be in your hands before the conference starts. Good. Yolanda picked up her glasses again and tucked them in her shirt pocket. Don't tell him a thing. I haven't said a word. I know you haven't. Yolanda looked at her the way she had when Celestine was 12 years old and had figured out how to balance a household budget on her own because no one had told her she couldn't. That's always been your gift, baby. You know when to be quiet. The compliance officer's name was Raymond Osei. He was methodical, careful, and deeply uncomfortable with conflict, which meant he was exactly the right kind of person for what Celestine needed, someone who would follow procedure without drama. She walked him through the client event budget records she had pulled as CFO, travel invoices, gift receipts submitted under company accounts, conference registrations billed to a client entertainment line that had nothing to do with any client. Raymond's discomfort grew with every page she set in front of him. She's an employee, Celestine said simply. These are company funds. I'm documenting it for you and stepping back. You handle it according to policy. I'll need to loop in legal, Raymond said. Sandra Kwame is already aware. She's expecting your call. Raymond looked at the stack of documents. This will mean suspension pending investigation, at minimum. I know, Celestine said. Do it right, do it quietly, and do it at the conference. The night before Blake left, Celestine sat at the desk in the spare room with Gideon's final report in front of her. Every page in order, every number confirmed. She could hear Blake in the bedroom down the hall, the drag of a suitcase zipper, the thud of shoes being dropped into a bag, the small, ordinary sounds of a man preparing for a trip he believed would change everything for him. Celestine turned to the last page of the report and read it through one final time. Then she closed the folder and placed her hand flat on top of it. She was ready. The conference room was on the third floor of the Meridian Hotel, floor-to-ceiling windows, rows of padded chairs facing a projection screen at the front, a long table where 6 board members and 4 outside investors sat with water glasses and notepads, looking like people who expected to be impressed. Blake was already at the podium when Celestine arrived. He looked good. He always looked good when he was performing. Dark suit, fresh haircut, the confident lean he did with one hand on the podium like he owned it. Destiny sat in the front row just off to the side, legs crossed, wearing a rust-colored dress and a smile that said she thought she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Celestine stood at the back of the room for a moment and watched. Blake had already pulled up the first slide. The Hargrove Logistics Partnership. The deal Celestine had spent 4 months structuring. The rate agreements, the regional routing analysis, the 3-party contract she had negotiated personally over 11 separate calls. Her name was nowhere on the slide. This opportunity came out of 18 months of groundwork on our end, Blake was saying. I identified the gap in the Southeast Corridor early, started building those relationships, and what you're looking at today is the result of that investment. One of the investors, a man with silver hair named Douglas Fitch, who Celestine knew from 2 previous meetings, was nodding slowly and taking notes. Celestine walked down the center aisle. She didn't rush. She didn't make a sound beyond the quiet click of her heels on the floor between the rows of chairs. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm and moved like someone who had every right to be there, which she did because she was the CFO of this company, and this was her deal. Blake saw her when she was about halfway down. His hand tightened on the podium. Celestine. He recovered fast, gave the room a smooth, easy smile. Good of you to join us. Of course, she said pleasantly. She stopped at the table's edge and faced the board and the investors directly. I apologize for the delay. I wanted to make sure I had the complete documentation with me. She set the portfolio on the table and opened it. The Hargrove partnership began in March of last year, she said, pulling out the first set of papers and sliding them toward Douglas Fitch. Here's the initial analysis I prepared. You'll see my name on the header and the date. This is the Southeast Corridor routing model Blake just mentioned. I built it. Fitch picked up the page. He looked at it. Then he looked at Blake. Blake's jaw was tight. Celestine, this isn't the time to... The rate agreement, she continued, setting the next document on the table without raising her voice. was negotiated over 11 calls, which I conducted. Here are the call logs and my personal notes from each session, countersigned by the Hargrove team's legal contact. She turned her next page. And here is the final 3-party contract, which I drafted. The room was very quiet. Destiny stood up. "This is embarrassing," she said, her voice sharp but too loud for the space. "She can't just walk in here and—" "Ms. Pruitt." Celestine looked at her directly. Her voice didn't rise even slightly. "Sit down. I'll get to you." Destiny didn't sit down, but she didn't say anything else either. Something in Celestine's eyes stopped her. Celestine reached into the back of the portfolio and removed a separate set of pages. She didn't put these on the table. She held them and looked at Destiny steadily. "You've been receiving direct transfers from a joint marital account into a personal account opened under the name D.A. Pruitt Cole," Celestine said. 4 months. Documented. The account was opened 1 week after the first transfer. She paused. "Our forensic accountant traced the structure. You didn't stumble into this money. You helped build the system to receive it." Destiny's face changed. From across the room, a door opened quietly. Raymond Osei stepped in, his expression tight and professional, a company badge clipped to his jacket. He moved to Destiny's side without making a scene. "Ms. Pruitt," Raymond said, low and even, "I need you to come with me. Your employment is suspended pending a formal investigation. I'll explain your rights and next steps outside." Destiny looked at Raymond, then at Celestine, then at Blake. Blake didn't move. He was still standing at the podium with his hand resting on it, but the performance was completely gone now. He looked like a man who had walked confidently into a room and only just realized the floor wasn't there. Douglas Fitch had put down his pen. Every person at the table was watching. Raymond stepped back and held the door open. Destiny walked through it. She didn't say anything. The door closed behind them both with a soft, final click. The room sat in the kind of silence that follows something that cannot be undone. Celestine closed her portfolio. She looked at Blake for a long moment, just long enough to let him feel the full weight of it. Then she looked at the board. "I'm happy to continue the presentation from the beginning," she said, "with the correct attribution." It was Aunt Yolanda who spoke next, from her chair at the far end of the table, where she had been sitting quietly the whole time. "Before we do that," Yolanda said, setting down her water glass, "Blake, there's something you and I need to discuss. An emergency shareholder meeting has been called for this afternoon." The emergency shareholder meeting lasted 47 minutes. Yolanda ran it the way she ran everything. Direct, no detours, no room for theater. She sat at the head of the table in a smaller conference room 2 floors below where Blake had spent his morning falling apart. Her reading glasses were on. Her copy of the company's founding charter was open in front of her. She had done this before, years ago, with a different person who thought the company was softer than it was. That person was also gone now. Blake had a seat at the table. He used it. He tried charm first. He always tried charm first. "Yolanda, I think if we just take a step back here, the motion is already on the table, Blake." Yolanda didn't look up from the charter. "You can speak to the record if you'd like." "That's your right." He tried authority next. "I have a contract. There's a process for—" "Your contract has a misconduct clause." She turned a page. 3 of them, actually. Financial misappropriation, misrepresentation to the board, breach of fiduciary responsibility. She finally looked up at him over her glasses. "Celestine's documentation covers all 3. So does yours, if you read it carefully." He went quiet after that. The vote took less than 4 minutes. Yolanda's founding shares were enough. The other members followed without hesitation. Celestine had briefed them the week before, not with emotion, but with numbers and documents, which was the only language a board table truly respected. Blake's company badge was collected before he left the building. His parking validation was not processed. He stood on the sidewalk outside the Meridian Hotel in his good dark suit, with his presentation clicker still in his jacket pocket, and he had nowhere to be. Celestine was home before him. She had changed out of her conference clothes. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and her hands flat on the surface when Blake walked through the door. No documents this time, no portfolio. She didn't need them anymore. He looked at her. "Celestine." "Sit down," she said. He sat. "I'm not going to yell at you," she said. "I'm not going to cry. We're going to talk about what you did, and then I'm going to tell you what happens next." What followed was not an argument. Blake tried once to interrupt, and she simply waited until he stopped, and then continued. She talked about the hotel charges, the voicemail, the account in Destiny's altered name, the money he'd funneled while telling her they couldn't afford to keep up her mother's medical payments. She talked about the board meetings he'd attended without her knowledge, the things he'd said about her stepping back, the presentation he had stood up and delivered with her name scrubbed from every slide. She said all of it plainly, the way she would have delivered a financial summary, clear, sequenced, complete. Blake's face moved through several things while she spoke: defensiveness, shame, a brief, ugly attempt at justification that died when he saw her expression didn't change. "She's not coming back," Celestine said at the end. "In case you're wondering." He looked up. "Destiny lost her job today," Celestine said. "The company is filing formal charges, embezzlement, account structuring. The compliance documentation is airtight. And the industry is small, Blake. You know how small it is." She picked up her water glass. "Her name is already moving through it." She wasn't wrong. By that evening, 3 calls had come in from people in the logistics network who had heard pieces of the story. By the next morning, Destiny's name was attached to words nobody wanted on their roster: fraud, misconduct, suspended pending charges. 2 recruiters she had quietly contacted the week before stopped returning her messages. And without the job, without the money, without the secrecy, there was nothing left to hold on to. Destiny's last text to Blake came 2 days later. It was short. It did not ask how he was doing. Celestine called Priscilla the day after the conference. She didn't want to do it by phone, but she also couldn't sit across from Priscilla in her sunroom and watch her try to hold her face together, so the phone was kinder. She kept it simple: the affair, the money, the plan to push her out. Priscilla went very quiet on the other end of the line, and stayed quiet for a long time. "He told me you were pulling back," Priscilla finally said, "from the business. He said you'd been talking about it." "I know," Celestine said. "He's been saying that for months." Another long silence. "I'm sorry," Priscilla said. Her voice had gone thin and old. "Celestine, I'm so sorry." "I know you are," Celestine said, and she meant it. By Friday, the house was quiet in a different way. Blake stood in the living room with its high ceilings and the furniture Celestine had chosen, and the kitchen she had renovated 2 years ago when he said he wanted an open layout. Her things were already gone. She had moved efficiently, the way she did everything. What remained was mostly his suits, his equipment, the framed photo of them from their 5th anniversary that she had left on the counter without ceremony. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He stood there, in the house she had paid for, and he was alone in it. The new office had floor-to-ceiling windows. Celestine had picked this space herself, not for the view, though the view was good, a clean sweep of the city skyline in the late afternoon light, but because of the light itself. It came in warm and steady from the west, and it made the room feel like something you had earned. Her name was on the glass door: Okafor Strategy Group. The bell was gone, quietly and legally, 4 months after she had walked out of that house. She had not missed it once. The firm had launched 8 months ago with full backing from the company. Yolanda had moved fast, converting Celestine's role and reputation into equity in the new consulting arm before anyone else thought to ask. 2 anchor clients in the first month, 6 by month 4. The logistics network that had once buzzed with Blake's name now circulated hers in a different register. Not gossip, not damage control, but recommendation. Call Celestine. She built the model. She knows the numbers. She was on her 3rd hire. Blake was selling software now. Not bad software, and not a bad company, Mid-tier, regional, the kind of firm that sponsored local business breakfasts and had motivational posters in the conference room. His charm still worked on the phone. It always had. But charm without backing was just sound, and everyone in the room could eventually hear the difference. He had tried, twice, to re-enter the logistics world. Both times the same thing happened. A promising early conversation, a background check, a sudden vagueness from the other side that cured itself by going silent. The industry was small. Celestine had been right about that, too. He lived in an apartment now. 2 bedrooms, one he used as an office, though he rarely worked from home because the quiet was the wrong kind. He still wore good suits. He still had the same easy smile that made strangers trust him in the first 30 seconds. None of it went anywhere useful anymore. Destiny was in Atlanta. She had left within 6 weeks of the charges being filed, which was fast, but not fast enough. The embezzlement case had already seeded itself into the industry's informal network by the time her boxes were packed. The altered account, the diverted funds, the client event budgets redirected to personal use, all of it was documented, all of it had been shared through the proper channels, and proper channels had a way of leaking sideways into exactly the right inboxes. She was working front of house at a corporate hospitality company now. It was not nothing, but it was not what she had planned for herself, and the confidence she had worn like a second skin, the kind that made her feel comfortable laughing in a woman's face at a brunch, had been replaced by something quieter and more careful. She had learned, the hard way, that an industry that talked about you kindly would also talk about you otherwise, and that the difference was entirely up to you. Her name still came up, occasionally, in logistics circles. Not often, just enough. Priscilla called on a Wednesday. Celestine was between meetings, standing at the window with her second coffee, when she saw the name light up her phone. She picked up. "I just wanted to hear your voice," Priscilla said. She sounded the way she always sounded now, softer, less arranged, like she'd stopped rehearsing herself.
"How's the new office?" "Good," Celestine said. "Really good, actually." "I'm glad." A pause. "He asked me to reach out." Celestine looked out at the skyline. A plane moved slow and silent across the far edge of it. "He didn't say what he wanted," Priscilla continued. "Just that he'd like to talk. I told him I'd mention it." "I know," Celestine said. "Thank you for telling me." "What should I tell him?" Celestine took a small sip of her coffee. The skyline was turning gold at the edges where the sun was dropping. She thought about the anniversary dinner, the hotel charges, the voicemail she had listened to in the blue quiet of an early morning, the brunch, a woman's laughter, bright and sharp and so sure of itself. She thought about the smile she had worn that day, walking away. She was wearing it now, faintly, without meaning to. "Tell him nothing," she said. "You don't need to explain it. Just nothing." Priscilla was quiet for a moment, then, gently, "Okay, baby." They talked for a few more minutes about ordinary things, Priscilla's garden, a cousin's new baby, whether the rain was coming before the weekend. When they hung up, Celestine held the phone for a moment and then set it face down on the desk. She worked for another hour and a half, a contract review, a slide deck for a new client pitch, a quick exchange with her third hire who had a question about the analytics model and asked it clearly and listened to the answer the same way. Celestine liked that about her. At 6 o'clock, she closed the laptop. The office had gone golden and quiet around her. Her name was still on the door. The city was still there outside the glass, steady and wide and lit up in the last of the afternoon. She smiled. The same smile, the one that had unnerved Destiny, the one that had cost nothing and said everything. Then she picked up her bag, turned off the light, and walked out. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!